Well, the initial thing was to make sure that, the staff is okay. This was an unusual event in the fact that, it impacted a large portion of Madison County where, the staff lives. So, make sure that, is everyone okay? Is everyone accounted for?
The morning of the 28th, we did triage. We assigned, of all the folks that we had available to do storm surveys, we sat down and said, okay, these are the people who have done enough surveys to where they can probably lead a team.
I immediately got on the phone and spoke with pretty much all of our emergency managers for our 14 counties, the hardest hit areas. I was trying to map out where the hardest hit areas were so that we could tackle it and get out there as soon as we could the next day.
In this case, we needed to go everywhere pretty much. I believe it was 12 of our 14 counties, maybe 13 of our 14 counties had tornadoes, and I believe there was fatalities in 11 counties. Trying to determine where to go first was almost like triage, starting from the worst damage and working your way down. So then looking who's available. The schedule that we have, the quote-unquote fixed schedule, pretty much became obsolete. It was kind of like show up and we'll make use of your time and we'll send you somewhere. So then it was trying to put the best available resources in the best places that they could work. And that was, basically planning.
Okay, now that we have enough people to staff 4 survey teams, these are the areas that we need to go to the most. These are the areas that have had the worst damage. These are the areas that we have the fuel to access. That was probably the most effective way of game planning for the following day, was deciding the night before, okay, these people are going to meet at the office at this time. And that's how the rest of the week ended up working out. We would decide, okay, we still need to go out to this area and this area and this area, so we need all of you folks to come back.
That was the biggest thing. That was just the coordination, trying to get the resources that we needed, trying to make sure the schedules were set, trying to make sure that, we were on top of the surveys. The media was involved in what we were doing. The information was getting passed along pretty freely.
And he said, there's been some sort of power hit. We're not really sure what the magnitude is, but TVA has asked us to relay this information. So I wrote up a 1 or 2, maybe 3-line statement on the power is out, something with the lines that come into the area, they've been damaged, time of restoral is unknown.
Seeing those TVA, those high tension TVA power, or those lines go down the way that they went down, they were crumpled up. Those things are supposed to withstand 150 mile per hour winds. That's what I've been told. So,
the first morning after the event, it's one of those things where we're in the dark as much as everyone else. We had power here, we had generator, we could see the TV feeds. The problem is the folks at the TV stations didn't know what was going on either, because nothing was getting reported to them. So initially, we really maybe didn't know what we needed. We knew the situation was bad, but we didn't know how bad.
Chris and myself were both out, and we needed to be out. We did designate somebody, obviously, internally to sort of deal with the communications and the requests.
I remember we had no web internet access, and I was dealing with some issues there, trying to figure out how to get information out via our web page when we didn't have the means to update it here. So I was having to work with the region to do that. And
we were completely busy pretty much from the time we walked in to the time we left. We had overnight interviews from other countries. Some were usual media interviews, such as local newspapers. We had a couple of the local television stations want to come out and do a few live shots kind of very early in the morning in the wee hours of our midnight shift. But the other ones that were completely shocked me were the ones from Central and South America. We had people from television and radio shows down there that somehow obviously knew what happened, somehow got our phone number. How that happened, I'm not quite sure. A country, half a world away. But yeah, we had translators. There was one specifically that I did from Colombia. We were constantly updating emergency managers if they were out and about very late at night whenever I first got in, and starting it maybe even as early as maybe 4 in the morning, just kind of depending on what they needed. We were pretty much there for them, so whatever they needed is what we gave them.
We had a lot of people come in from outside the area. Several people from regional headquarters drove up for just a little while, dropped, supplies off and left, and then another person would come up. We had several people, of course, different forecasters come in from different areas to actually help us cover shift more than anything, so that we can continue our operations here internally and locally. So,
after the tornadoes here, we had staff from other offices coming in to give our staff relief so they could go on storm surveys because they were familiar with the area. So we had forecasters come in, and we had to find a place for them to stay. I ended up having to just drive here locally and walk in the hotel and say, are you open? Do you have electricity? Do you have food? And we ended up putting these people that came in to give us relief, some of them in hotels that had no electricity, but they had a grill outside that they were cooking food for, and windows that were open.
Our job doesn't end just because warnings are done.
As I was getting the keys and getting the maps and everything together for the storm survey, he said, you realize it's really bad down in Phil Campbell. Are you prepared for this? And I said, well, it doesn't really matter if I'm prepared for it. We all have to be able to pitch in to do what needs to get done. It doesn't matter if you're prepared for it, because if I'm not prepared for it, someone else is going to have to be. Again, I can't tell you how many thousands of miles we put on our government vehicles. How many miles folks put on their own vehicles because we didn't have enough vehicles internally to do it. There's a lot of cataloging that has to get done after the fact, because that serves the basis for research that follows. And we've seen it in some of the conferences that have followed this event, was people showing maps of what we've done. And because we took the time to map it out and provide all this detail, there are people going through research that will help us do this job better next time. So there's a lot of meaning to what happens after the event. The event doesn't stop when the last tornado warning expires. The event continues even longer than that.
Personally, I visited one home. There was a gentleman my age, maybe a few years older, and we were standing looking at what was left of his basement, and his house was gone, and he said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I've just lost everything. And I thought, he's my age. I understand. How can you start all over again?
We went to one area where there were 3 houses. Well, it was two trailers and a house, just basically utterly destroyed. They've got them a little tent set up. They got their family there. They're drinking their sweet tea and eating, and basically thankful that they're alive. It's like one elderly gentleman out of the group told me. He said, hey, all this can be replaced. He said, family can't.
the hardest part was definitely seeing the areas where people died. I mean, I had seen, the first time I've ever been to a damaged area, tornado damage, where people had died was the Super Tuesday outbreak. That was 08, and that was hard. I was literally standing on top of a house where 3 people were there, and they were killed. They were thrown and killed. So, and one was a little boy. So having to see that again was very difficult.
Words can't really describe the first thoughts that entered my mind upon getting to Phil Campbell. I really had to compartmentalize. I had to block out my emotions as best I could. I've never seen anything like it. Nothing in your life can compare you to seeing damage like that. There's no preparing for it. There's no seeing pictures of damage like that. Doesn't matter. It's being in the middle of, for lack of a better term, a war zone, and seeing people pick through the pieces of their lives, and seeing people sobbing openly, and there's just no way to prepare for that.
And I remember a young lady up in Higdon who had lost her whole family, and hadn't even, this was several days later, and had refused to leave. I remember families in Phil Campbell that lost everything, Rainsville. I mean, I can go hold down the whole list. I can remember their faces. I can remember, Andy Cool and I surveyed over in Higdon, and we remember a family over there that, by all accounts, I mean, just quite honestly, they should be dead. I mean, their whole house was wiped clean, and everything was. I mean, the contents of their home was swept a half a mile almost, a quarter mile to half a mile, and they didn't even have an interior closet to take cover in, none less a storm shelter. So they took cover in the hallway, and they weren't even touched. And I started thinking, that sometimes there's probably a higher being or higher power that makes decisions that are beyond our warning decision making, and those things, those things will stick with you. The biggest concern for me was, I'm working, see pretty strong looking signature on radar moving right toward my neighborhood. I call my wife. Their wife and daughter's in the bathtub, and the phone goes dead, and I don't know what's going on. And I hear later reports of damage, and later my brother-in-law sends me a text. He lives up in Murfreesboro, and he said, "Hey, I've heard from Kay. She's okay." I wasn't able. We really didn't have any communications within the Huntsville area because of the power outages and the cell phones. But for whatever reason, she could get hold of him up there, and then he could get hold of me. It was just kind of odd, but fortunately I was able to know a few hours later that she was okay.
We lost power with the first wave of tornadoes that came through. What eventually ended up being rated a lower end 2 went just through the northern part of my neighborhood as it lifted. So I heard that and was completely terrified. So yes, meteorologists, we get terrified too. I was literally in the closet with the dog and the bird and had the weather radio. I'm so beyond thankful that we had that, because if we didn't, I don't know that we would be here. Obviously, I don't know that we would have. I know we wouldn't have gotten the warnings.
Because my normal back way was all flooded out, so I had to turn around and go back down the Parkway, and then I get between Meridianville and Hazel Green, and I hear on the radio there's a tornado on the ground between Meridianville and Hazel Green. And then I go by the middle school, and I look off, and I see all these wispy clouds spiraling around in front of the school, and I'm like, uh-oh, this is not good.
Yes, I live in Harvest, about 3/4 of a mile south of where the long track EF5 passed through the Yarborough Road, Waltriana area. I saw it approaching Harvest. We had a long history of knowing that had produced significant damage, and I saw it passing just to the south of the little Harvest dot on our map. One of our pretty reliable storm spotters called and said, "I don't think anyone has told you how bad Harvest is right now," her exact words. And we chatted a minute, and I said, "Can you give me some cross streets?" And she said, "They turned us around at Yarborough Road." And like I said, I live not far from Yarborough Road, and so I heard that, and I'm not lying when I say my blood ran cold. I can't really describe that feeling, knowing that there were folks killed very close by, people who suffered so much damage, and I had escaped with just a scratch. That's something that I still struggle with to this day.
I remember driving home that first night, and everything was pitch black. It was a very eerie feeling. I felt like I was in this like a third world country, almost in another universe or something like that, another time.
Then getting home, it was a clear night, and it was like you could see stars like I've never seen before in a city. And it was also very quiet too, except for a few cars going down the road. It was just absolute quiet.
The biggest challenge, biggest frustration was we had dusk to dawn curfew here through at least the Monday, maybe even till Tuesday. And the one night that we got back really late, I want to say that was Saturday night, may have been Friday night or Saturday night. Really wanted to get back to the house to get some sleep because we had a long day the next day. And on the way back, as luck would have it, that was the night we got pulled over.
But I will never forget, every day I woke up and he had gone out and gotten, hamburger meat to grill that night. He'd gotten some chicken, some vegetables. He kind of made the comment, it was almost like the men went back several centuries and had gone back to hunters and gatherers, and they went and fought the other men at, the Kroger at the 18-wheeler to get simple things like ice and, food and beverages. And
3 days in when there's no power and you've been gone for 14-hour days and you haven't had time to find any type of grocery that is open, a banana, an orange, an apple, it's just so nice to have something fresh and something fresh and healthy to eat.
I will say the first hot shower that I got after the power went out was by far the best shower I've ever had in my life. Our boss here has a hot water heater, or has a gas hot water heater. So obviously he had massive amounts of hot water at his house. So we all took turns going over to his house and grabbing hot showers. And like I said, having gotten ready Wednesday, that didn't happen until Saturday. And just, let me tell you, it was amazing. It made me really appreciate the little things in life.